Hi, today I'd like to speak to you about methods of increasing sales revenue for your business, specifically regarding what's called the sales revenue formula. It has three pillars within the formula, and when utilized properly, and when your logic, your creativity is geared around enhancing those three pillars, the results, the returns on your efforts can be absolutely fantastic. I'd like to start off with a quote by Albert Einstein when he once said, "Try not to become a man of success, rather become a man of value." And I commonly hear from a number of people, how can I make more money? How can we enhance the revenue for our businesses? And I think the easiest way is, as what Albert Einstein said here, become more valuable. So obviously an understanding of your customer needs is key, but when you start creating ideas in order to add value to yourself or to your business, without some guiding principles, your proposals, your ideas can go off track, can go off target. And so the sales revenue formula, which I'm going to explain to you today, really gives you a nice framework to guide that creativity so that your value additions that you come up with actually would generate a meaningful result for your business. So, can we better engineer value to increase sales? I believe the answer is yes. But we know value creation is a very challenging process. But in order to actually achieve your goals, you need to become more valuable than, say, your competition. So understanding your clients' challenges and goals is essential to this process because ultimately your customers are looking for someone to help solve a problem that they are facing or take them to a goal of which they desire. But again, value creation without structure can be an incredibly inconsistent process. I'm sure many of us have had a fantastic idea one evening, only the next day after a more detailed thought process have we realized that unfortunately the idea is not as strong as we hoped it to be. So the sales revenue formula will give you some guidance about how each of your ideas to increase value can actually work towards you in a more efficient way. So let's just jump straight into it. What is the sales revenue formula? So the sales revenue formula consists of three main parts. They are the number of clients, the average sales value, and the quantity of sales. So just to give some clarity, number of clients over a given period, if your business is already operational, you hopefully would have closed or converted a number of prospects into actual paying customers or clients. So the total number of these individuals or brands, this is what I mean by number of clients. The average sales value is if you look at the revenue that you have collected during that period of when you actually converted those prospects into paying clients and customers. If you average it out, you should, if you take the total sales revenue and divide it by the number of clients, you should get an average figure. So this is what we mean by the average sales value. And then the quantity of sales. This is the number of sales that were made over a given period of time. It's different to the value of those sales. So for example, you could have sold a product 5 times in a given year, but the average value of those products could come to, for example, 100,000. So let's put the formula in more of a traditional mathematical view. Number of clients, part one, multiplied by the average sales value, part two, multiplied again by the quantity of sales equals your total sales revenue. So just to make it a little bit easier to understand, let's create a example using some fictitious figures. So in this case, let's say we have a company X, which could be your business, let's say in a given period, and you can choose any period, but obviously a larger data sample is always going to give you more accurate results. But let's just say in this example, it's a 1 year period, and this B2B organization has acquired 20 clients in that year. So then they would multiply the 20 by the average sales value. And now let's just say, again, for their given business, the average sales value of their service is $10,000, give or take. And then thirdly, that is multiplied by the quantity of sales. So amongst these 20 clients, they sell them a product 10,000, a service $10,000 each, and their clients will have purchased that service up to 10 times in a year. So this gives them a total revenue of $2 million for that year. So that is the basic mechanics of the formula, and I want to give full credit to the gentleman where I learned this formula from. His name is Jay Abraham. He is a fantastic marketing and sales business coach. I highly recommend that you visit his website, and I can put that in the link below so you can learn more about his work. He has thousands of free resources available online. He's also an author, and I do recommend that you also pick up some of his books to learn more about his amazing business insights. So let's try and do a real world example with quite a common challenge that most businesses or executives are tasked with, and that's to increase revenue by a certain percentage. And in this case, just to keep math simple, we'll focus at 10%. Now, commonly when I put executives in the hot seat and I ask them how would they go about increasing revenue by a given percentage, the typical answer is to increase the number of clients to be in line with that percentage growth. So if they needed to increase their revenue by 10%, most commonly they'll say, okay, then we need to acquire 10% more clients. So I'm going to show you now how that rolls out using the sales revenue formula. And let's focus on company X based on the data in the earlier slide that I've shared. So in a year, company X acquired 20 clients. If they're to increase that by 10%, and that means their total number of their target number of clients they need to acquire is 22. Let's see if that achieves the revenue growth that they're looking for. So we're not going to touch their average sales value. That will remain the same at $10,000. And we're not going to change the quantity of sales, which will remain the same at 10 per year. And let's see the revenue. So in the previous year, they generated $2 million. Now that we've increased their number of clients by 10%, which is two new clients, they have achieved their revenue targets of 2.2 million, a 10% increase in growth. But this raises an important point. To increase the number of clients for any business is quite a difficult challenge. It's costly, it's time consuming, and for businesses that purely focus on client or customer growth, sometimes they risk neglecting their existing customer base, and they're not providing the value to their core set of customers. And all that ends up happening is they are acquiring new customers, but their existing customer base, the people that they've already spent a significant amount of time and money to acquire, they are leaving their business and taking their money to your competitor or so on. So I just want to highlight that using the sales revenue formula, you can see that you don't just need to apply your 10% growth logic under one pillar, which is increasing the number of clients. You can actually apply the percentage growth that you want to achieve across each pillar and then determine what ways you can add more value to achieve those goals. So I'll walk through a different example to give you a better understanding of what I mean. What would happen if we take that 10% increase, but we apply it to all three pillars? So we've already increased the previous number of clients by 10%. Now let's increase their average sales value by 10%. So 10% of $10,000 will increase their average sales value to $11,000. And then let's increase the quantity of sales, the number of transactions they complete in a year, by 10%, and therefore that goes up to 11 per year. Let's look at the impact on their revenue, their sales revenue. And we can see now it's grown substantially to 2.6 million per year, which is a fantastic growth. And what you'll notice if you run the math, this is a 30% increase. So every 10% increase across each pillar has had a cumulative effect on the total sales revenue. And I hope that this is an eye-opening insight, because now if you're ever tasked with the challenge of trying to increase revenue by a given percentage, you can look at the other pillars within the formula and say, would it be easier to focus our efforts and time to justify an increase in any of the other two pillars rather than just putting all of our efforts into acquiring new clients alone? So I've shown you now that you can get very linear growth in sales by taking whatever your desired percentage increase and dividing it equally and applying it to each of the sales revenue pillars. But you can also achieve what's known as exponential growth by skewing the percentage growth rates and applying different values to each pillar, which I'll show you now. So if we want exponential growth, let's just continue with the previous example. Let's say that we have committed ourselves to grow the number of clients by 10%. But now let's add a different percentage. Let's say that we want to increase the average sales value by 20%. So the sales value goes up to $12,000 now. And then again, we want to apply a different percentage growth to the quantity of sales. In this case, 30%. So 10 plus 20 plus 30, it should be 60%. However, you'll see now the new sales figure as a result is $3.4 million. And what you're getting here is actually a 72% growth in sales revenue. And this is what we mean by exponential growth rate. So if you understand your business and which pillars would be easier for you to add more value to, therefore to grow them, you can put your eggs in different baskets with the aim of achieving exponential growth, not just linear growth. So that's the mechanics of the sales revenue formula over with. Let's focus on the actual value creation and how to structure your logic using the sales revenue formula. So as we know, there are three core pillars to the sales revenue formula. And what I would like you to do now is to structure your thinking of how you can add more value to acquire a greater number of clients, how you can add more value by justifying an increase in the average sales value of your products and services, and how you can justify adding more value so that you can get a greater number of transactions, increase the quantity of sales. So what I typically do is I get the work group that I'm conducting an exercise with together, and I structure our thoughts along each of these three pillars. And so what I'll usually do is spend an hour brainstorming with the team to come up with a variety of ideas that can actually help us acquire new clients. And then once I feel we have a strong list of ideas, I'll move on to the next pillar, and then I'll ask the team to come up with a variety of ideas that they feel could help justify an increase in price, or any other ways to cross-sell, upsell, and even sometimes downsell in a variety of different situations to increase the average sales value. And then once I have a strong enough list of ideas, I move on to how can we actually increase the quantity of sales with a particular client or customer. And again, we sit there and we come up with a variety of ideas, whether it be remarketing or cross-selling, or there's a whole magnitude of things that you can probably think of to get your customers to buy more, to add more value and get them to buy more. Now, when you're finished with this exercise, you're going to have a lot of ideas, and you need a methodology to help you prioritize and implement the development of those ideas so you get the greatest bang for your buck in the shortest period of time. And there's a very simple methodology that you can use to do this. So it's called an action priority matrix, and it's a very simple graph which consists of two axes, and on the y-axis you place this word impact, and on the x-axis you place this word effort. And what you do is you bring up your lists of ideas for each of the three pillars of the sales revenue formula, and you ask yourself, is any given idea, how impactful do we think it would be? And based on its impactfulness, how much effort do we think it would take to actually realize that idea? And so when you've done that for each idea, you usually end up with a chart that looks something like this, where your ideas are scattered across the board, and it's quite easy for you to see which ideas have the highest impact for the least amount of effort, and which ideas are will deliver the least amount of impact, but will require the greatest amount of effort. So in this scenario, idea 4 would clearly be the idea that they would want to, as a team, implement first, as it will most likely generate the most and the greatest returns for their business. This is not saying that you would disregard the other ideas, but it just gives you it gives you a list of priorities in order where you should invest your efforts initially. So with that being said, thank you for your time. I hope you've learned something new with the sales revenue formula and with the action priority matrix. Please subscribe, like, and share for more content just like this. Thank you.